It was a beautiful day to be flying over the Nevada desert, and all 5 of us were aboard the small plane for the trip. My name is Mason Beckett. I'm 5 feet 11 inches and 27 years old. I work as a machinist at a company that makes parts for planes, which I find pretty cool. Originally, I had dreams of becoming an archaeologist, but life took me in a different direction, and I never even finished college. Not that I mind, though. I'm happy with where I am now. With me on the plane were Teresa, my fiancé, and her brother Tony, who had just earned his pilot's license and was the one flying us. Teresa is about 5 feet 9 inches with long reddish-brown hair, while Tony is a bit over 6 feet tall and well-built. Also with us was Mike, my best friend, who's always cracking jokes. I couldn't very well say no to him, especially knowing the trip wouldn't be nearly as fun without his humor to lighten the mood. Lastly, there was Christy, who was dating Tony. She's a beautiful black woman, and while they sometimes got curious stares from others, it didn't seem to bother either of them. Christy is also good friends with Teresa, and I believe it was Teresa who introduced her to Tony. Tony wanted to celebrate earning his pilot's license, so he invited us all on a day trip. We were all excited, especially with the perfect weather. As we climbed into the sky, I gazed out the window, amazed at how small everything looked from above and how vast the landscape seemed. Teresa snuggled close to me and said it was romantic. Taking her hint, I gave her a quick kiss, secretly wishing for a bit more privacy. Christy was sitting beside Tony in the co-pilot's seat, looking a little uneasy. Though she didn't say anything, it was clear to all of us that she wasn't a fan of heights. Mike, on the other hand, kept up a steady stream of jokes, joking about dropping pennies over the town below and saying other things that made us laugh and groan at the same time. We'd been flying for about 3 hours when we started to get uncomfortable. "Hey, man," Mike said, "why don't we open the window so I can take a leak? Make those people down there think it's raining." We all laughed and agreed that we should land soon to stretch our legs and use the bathroom. Tony nodded, saying he would find a place to land. A few minutes later, it happened. Christy screamed first, spotting something metallic moving toward us. "Oh my God!" Mike shouted, followed by the rest of us as we turned to the windows in disbelief. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt fear surge through me. A metallic object was flying toward us, and I couldn't make out what it was. All I could think was, is that some kind of UFO? I had never believed in UFOs and always thought those who claimed to see them were imagining things. But now, there it was, right in front of us. As it got closer, I saw Tony panicking, trying to steer the plane away. But then, something strange happened, the engine shut off. Tony yelled, "I'm losing control," while Christy, terrified, cried out in the front seat. The plane began to plummet, and all I could think was, we're in trouble. I clung to Teresa, my heart racing. I could barely pay attention to Mike, who might have been enjoying the rush, because I was too afraid. The ground rushed up toward us, and Tony fought with the controls, muttering frustrated curses at the plane. Just before impact, I thought I saw the strange ship again, but my focus was entirely on the ground. When we hit, it was like everything in the plane lurched forward. The entire aircraft seemed to tear apart around us. It all happened so fast that the details are hazy, but I clearly remember hearing several people scream in terror, my own voice among them. I woke up to find myself staring at a white ceiling. At first, I couldn't move, my body aching everywhere while also feeling strangely numb. As I lay there, unable to turn my head, I realized I must be in a hospital. It amazed me that I had survived the crash, with the terrifying moments just before still fresh in my mind. My thoughts immediately went to the others, and I felt a knot of worry, though deep down, I feared the worst. Still in shock, I reasoned that the strange ship I had seen must have been a product of my delirium, that perhaps I was still disoriented. Suddenly, the numbness faded, and I could move. It didn't happen gradually, it was almost instant. I sat up, surprised by how normal it felt. Up until that moment, I had assumed I was either in a full body cast or paralyzed. Looking around the room, I was shocked to find there were no beds. I had been lying on the floor, and I seemed to be the only one there. The light in the room was strange, as if it was coming from the walls rather than a lamp or fixture. The walls themselves were odd, curving gently rather than meeting in sharp angles, giving the room a surreal, otherworldly feel. One wall had a peculiar indentation and a strange discoloration that I guess might be a door, though there were no seams or handles to confirm it. It wasn't until I focused more intently on my surroundings that I realized, with a jolt, that I was completely unclothed and still sitting on the floor. I felt no pain, which was a shock after the crash. Looking down at myself, I was horrified to see something was terribly wrong. I felt off balance as I stood, a sense of discomfort overriding any physical pain. When I held my hands out in front of me, I knew immediately something was wrong. My left hand was delicate, with painted nails, while my right hand was much larger than usual. After taking a closer look at my body, a wave of horror washed over me. It was as if pieces of different people had been stitched together, like some kind of patchwork figure. I could see faint lines where the skin tones shifted, but there were no visible scars. I gasped as my hand touched the left side of my chest. A woman's chest was there, completely out of place on my body. The right side of my chest was normal, but everything else felt wrong. The skin on the left side was soft, smooth, and hairless. Tentatively, I touched the foreign breast, noticing that the pointer was much larger than my own, surrounded by a dark brown areola. In shock, I stared at my left arm. It didn't look like mine at all. It was slender, smooth, and feminine, the nails long and manicured. My eyes widened as I noticed something else, a small ring on my left hand. It was the ring I had given to Teresa when I asked her to marry me. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I staggered backward, collapsing back onto the floor, unable to tear my eyes away from my left arm and chest. It looked exactly like Teresa's. With a growing sense of dread, I started to examine the rest of my body, trying to make sense of what had happened. Suddenly, I noticed a change in my right arm at the shoulder. Though the chest remained the same, the arm was different. It was more muscular than my own, slightly less hairy, but still undeniably masculine. It took a moment for the recognition to set in, but when it did, I realized it looked like Tony's arm. The rest of my torso and waist seemed fine, though I noticed a small, faint scar running across my stomach that was barely visible. I felt a great sense of relief when I realized my right leg seemed completely normal. But my left leg... it was a different story. My left leg didn't belong to me. It looked entirely feminine, right down to the smooth skin. The only break in its appearance was just below my knee, where the calf and lower leg changed to a dark shade. I froze in horror, realizing it looked like Christie's leg. Below the calf, at the ankle, my leg transitioned back to a pale, white foot, Teresa's foot, I thought with a sinking feeling, noticing the painted toenails. As I tried to stand, I realized my left leg was several inches shorter than my right, which threw off my balance. At least, I thought, I still had my manhood. But the rest of me was a terrifying puzzle. If I had parts from my friends, where were they? What had happened to them? My imagination didn't want to answer those questions. I sank back to the floor, overwhelmed with fear, disgust, and confusion. I felt the urge to curl up and shut everything out. I think I cried for a long time, hoping for something that made sense to happen. I had no idea how long I waited, but eventually, something broke the silence. I could tell a couple of hours had passed, though there was no way to measure time. While I waited, I moved my new hands as if they had always been mine. When I touched my new breast, I was shocked by how sensitive it felt, and a pang of sadness hit me, thinking of Teresa. Just as hunger began to make itself known, I heard a faint hum. The indentation in the wall that I had assumed was a door opened, revealing a strange mechanical being. It had 4 metal legs, a small body, and several metal tentacles, along with a long, snake-like appendage that I assumed was its head. Nervously, I watched as it approached and faced me. I couldn't hold back any longer. "Where are my friends?" I demanded, my voice shaky with fear. The robot responded in a calm, mechanical voice. "This vessel inadvertently caused the destruction of your vessel. When I arrived, all units inside were damaged beyond repair. My stomach dropped. I was being spoken to as if I were a machine. The other units' CPUs were damaged. You were the only one repairable. I used salvaged parts from the other units to facilitate a repair in your systems. I just stared at it, stunned. It thought we were machines, like it was. I couldn't believe it. The horrifying realization settled in: my friends were dead. I had survived only because this thing had played Frankenstein with me. It believed all human parts were interchangeable, as if we were no different from machines. I shuddered and looked down at my disfigured body in horror. My fear shifted to anger. I needed to lash out. Without thinking, I charged at the robot, screaming as I threw a punch with my right arm, using all the muscle behind it. The impact was excruciating, and I heard the bones in my hand crack as it hit the metal, but the robot didn't even flinch. Still howling in pain, I fell to my knees, clutching my shattered hand to my chest. The robot simply watched me. Then, one of its metal tentacles extended toward me. As soon as it made contact, I felt frozen in place. It wasn't like before when I couldn't feel anything. I could still feel, but I couldn't move. Several smaller robots entered the room, surrounding me. One of them placed a light on my injured hand, and suddenly, the pain disappeared. It was as though the sensation was simply numbed, disconnected from my body. I watched in disbelief as the robots began cutting off my hand. To my shock, I didn't feel it, and there was no blood. I stared, captivated by the precision with which they worked. After removing my hand, they brought over a new one and attached it. They kept the light focused on the new hand and wrist, working on it for a few minutes. I watched, transfixed, as they sealed the hand to my wrist. There was no scar, just a slight discoloration where it had been joined. They turned off the light, and I could feel my new hand. I knew immediately it belonged to Mike. It had to be, since they had replaced mine with Tony's, and then the damaged hand that had been Tony's with what was left, Mike's. A small part of me felt relieved that it wasn't one of the girl's body parts, knowing I'd already been through too many changes involving them. Once the small robot scurried out, the larger robot withdrew its tentacle, and I found I could move again. I tentatively clenched my new hand, amazed to see it respond as though it had always been mine. I nervously glanced at the robot, aware that there was nothing I could do. This machine had saved my life, but for what reason, I had no idea. "What are you going to do with me?" I asked, feeling helpless. My mind raced with thoughts of being experimented on, or worse, enslaved. I had seen enough sci-fi movies to imagine the worst. The robot spoke, its voice calm and mechanical. We shall return you to your planet's surface." With that, it turned and left, the door sealing behind it as it exited. I was left in silence, unsure whether I'd truly be set free. I couldn't imagine why it would lie to me, but part of me feared that I wasn't going to like the answers. As my hunger grew, I sat, waiting, but eventually, I drifted into unconsciousness and collapsed to the floor. When I woke up again, it was night, and the stars were clearly visible above. Nervously, I examined myself. I was still naked, still looking like a Frankenstein creation. It hadn't been a dream. I felt a deep sense of disappointment. It wasn't just a nightmare I could escape. The memories of my lost friends hit me hard, and I sank to the ground, crying once more. The loss of Teresa, my fiancé, and Mike, my best friend, gone, all of them. By morning, when the sun rose, I could see my surroundings more clearly. Horror swept over me as I spotted the wreckage of the plane nearby. I gulped and slowly made my way toward it, dreading what I might find. The plane was torn apart, barely recognizable. I forced myself to keep moving, knowing I had to face what was left. Pieces of the plane were scattered around. One wing was completely gone, while the other hung on by a thread. After a long moment of hesitation, I peered inside, bracing myself to see the bodies of my friends. What I saw inside made my stomach churn. There were no bodies, though I should have expected that since the alien robots had used them as parts for me. What I hadn't expected was the blood splattered everywhere. The destruction left me with a chilling idea of how we must have looked when they found us. It wasn't a pretty sight. I moved a little farther from the wreck, not wanting to stray too far. I had no idea where I was or if anyone else was nearby. I sat down on a rock, hoping for a search party or someone to find us. Part of me feared no one would come. I was afraid to face others, afraid of being seen in this monstrous state, alone, with no friends to stand by me. To my surprise, people arrived sooner than I had anticipated. By the time they got there, I was starving. A helicopter landed, and searchers and medics came out, scanning the area for survivors. I startled them when I emerged. At first, they just stared, and I couldn't blame them. It took me asking 3 times before they finally brought me a blanket. It was bad enough walking around like this, but being unclothed too was more than I could bear. They immediately took me to the hospital, still staring at me as we went. No one believed my story at first, but with my mismatched body parts, they couldn't deny what they saw. No medical science on Earth could explain this. My very existence was proof that aliens were real. Lucky me. The hospital kept things quiet. When government agents showed up, I answered their questions patiently, though I was nervous they might make me disappear. Fortunately, they didn't seem too interested and eventually left, leaving me alone. I spent over 2 weeks in the hospital while they examined me. Though I hated it, I forced myself to cooperate, trying to adjust to the changes in my body with each passing day. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a faint scar around one of my eyes, which had turned green instead of its usual blue. My mismatched eyes fit perfectly with the rest of my disfigured body. Walking was difficult since one leg was shorter than the other. A nurse at the hospital suggested something I was reluctant to try at first, but eventually, I gave in. She brought me a high-heeled shoe, which I put on my smaller foot. It gave me just enough lift to walk without stumbling. I must have looked incredibly odd, with one tennis shoe and one high heel, but it was that or a platform shoe, which I sometimes wore on that foot too. I was relieved when they finally discharged me from the hospital and I could go home. The thought of facing Teresa's parents and explaining what had happened filled me with dread. I knew the media had already gotten wind of the story, but thankfully, it was the National Enquirer that first ran it, ensuring no one would believe it. I had a suspicion that the government agents who had questioned me played a part in that. The first time I stepped into my apartment, I noticed my neighbors staring at me with a mix of curiosity and unease. They'd heard the rumors, and I couldn't blame them. I probably looked strange. I covered most of it up by wearing loose clothes and sunglasses, trying to hide my odd appearance. But my mismatched shoes and one exposed chest were still noticeable. When I checked my answering machine, I was shocked to hear I'd been fired. I couldn't really blame them. How could I expect to keep a job looking like this? My neighbors were treating me like an outcast, and I feared my landlord would soon find an excuse to throw me out. Without a job, it wouldn't be long before that happened. I felt utterly defeated. Guilt consumed me. I was alive, and my friends were gone. Worse, I carried parts of them with me. I felt responsible for their deaths, even though I knew logically I wasn't. But knowing something and believing it are different things. I didn't know how much longer I could go on. Despite the doctor's efforts to help me, I was starting to seriously consider ending it all, finishing what fate had started. I felt as if I had somehow cheated death, and now I had to pay for it. The thought of taking my soul seemed like a relief, and I might have done it if I hadn't met Olivia. One evening, I was sitting in my apartment, drinking beer and staring at a photo of Teresa. I absent-mindedly looked at my finger, still wearing the engagement ring I had given her. It would always remind me of what I had lost. Her arm and chest weren't enough to fill that void. A knock on the door startled me. After a few moments of hesitation, fearing it was the landlord with an eviction notice, I opened the door. A woman stood there, a pretty blonde, with a large man beside her. They were both dressed in suits, and he looked less than friendly. "May we come in?" she asked. I stepped aside, gesturing for them to enter. I couldn't help but notice the way they both stared at my exposed breast, poking out from under my t-shirt. I knew I looked strange. "What can I do for you?" I asked, curious but also wary. They didn't seem like reporters. The man's demeanor made me think they might be government agents. I snorted to myself, half expecting them to be like the men in black. "It's what we can do for you," the woman replied. "I'm Olivia Donovan, and this," she gestured to the silent man beside her, "is Paul Stone. We work for a group that studies extraterrestrial encounters." I couldn't hold back a snicker. "With your experience, we'd like you to join our organization and help us learn more about them." I stared at them, surprised. "You came here with a job offer?" I asked, dumbfounded. They nodded and explained that it was more than just a job. They had access to information and evidence that the public didn't know about. They wanted me because I had first-hand experience, something most people only knew from reports or occasional bits of evidence. "I'll think about it," I said, still processing the offer. "Thank you," Olivia said, handing me a business card. "Call me when you've made up your mind." I promised I would, and as they left, I thought about it. The offer seemed sincere. I wasn't in a position to turn down any job, especially with my current situation. What's more, I realized I needed people who wouldn't treat me like a freak. Maybe they would understand, and maybe they'd treat me like a person again, not just a monster. After another beer, I decided to go for a walk to clear my head. Maybe I could figure things out. The idea of working with aliens, after everything that had happened to me, wasn't exactly appealing. But perhaps it could bring me some peace, some reason to keep going. The next day, Olivia stopped by again, asking if I wanted to have dinner with her. I was stunned that someone as beautiful as her would want to spend time with a freak like me. I figured it was just a tactic to get me to join her group, but I didn't mind. Over dinner, she admitted that she actually found my oddities interesting, which amused me. So far, everyone had been repelled by them. Throughout the evening, she was friendly, but not overbearing. I think I started to like her sense of humor, but more than that, I appreciated that she treated me like a person, not a crazy who had seen aliens, or a freak show. I liked that. She didn't pressure me about joining her group during dinner. In fact, she barely mentioned it. Mostly, she asked about what it was like having other people's body parts and what the aliens were like. The conversation made me uncomfortable, but she gracefully accepted my attempt to change the subject, which I appreciated. I went home feeling better about myself than I had in a while. I still wasn't sure what she wanted from me, but I was starting to realize I liked her. The memory of Teresa kept me from considering her for a relationship, but I thought she might become a good friend. After I said goodbye to Olivia, I went out for a walk, cursing my uneven legs and the discomfort they caused. As I walked a few blocks, I noticed someone following me. I tried to keep my pace, looking for a building to duck into. But the person behind me noticed and quickened their step. I turned and recognized Noah, one of my neighbors. He was 24 and often got into trouble. I used to get along with him, but after my accident, he'd become hostile. I started running, and he chased me, gaining on me. My legs made it harder to get away, but I pushed myself as best as I could. Noah was shouting insults, freak, monster, and a few others. Then there was a loud bang, and a searing pain shot through my hip. I collapsed, gasping as blood poured from the wound, covering my hand and spilling onto the ground. Noah stood over me, gun in hand, a look of pure hatred on his face. "Why?" I asked, terrified. "Because you're some kind of alien monster," he said, grinning in triumph. A figure appeared beside him, his girlfriend, though I didn't know her name. "Jenna's been following you around for me," Noah added. She glared at me, just as hateful as he was. What made things worse was when she pulled out a sawed-off shotgun and aimed it directly at my head. I gulped, realizing this was it. I'd survived a plane crash and an alien abduction, only to be killed by some redneck punk and his girlfriend. Knowing I was going to die, I lashed out, hitting Noah in the knee. He dropped to the ground, losing his grip on the gun. I grabbed it, but as I aimed, I heard another gunshot. Pain flared through my leg, and I screamed in agony as it burned. I struggled to lift the revolver, just in time to see Noah's face go pale as he ran. But Jenna was still there, shotgun in hand, looking furious. In a panic, I fired at her, surprised when I hit her in the chest. She screamed and fell back. I tried to sit up, but the pain was unbearable. My stomach was on fire, and everything hurt like hell. As I felt myself slipping into unconsciousness, I thought I saw the alien ship once more. When I woke up again, I was in the White Room. This time, I wasn't as surprised. I realized I could move without pain. As I sat up, I noticed the large snake-headed robot standing before me. "We have been monitoring your systems since your repair," it said. "Your recent injuries required further repair." We responded. I stared at the robot, stunned. They had bugged me. I had heard of aliens tracking people, but never thought they'd done it to me. I'm sure I should have been angrier about what the robot had done to me, but I felt so grateful for saving my life again. Reluctantly, I looked down to see what had been done this time, and gasped. I touched my legs, now completely whole, feeling them in disbelief. My waist caught my attention next, and I saw the distinct line where the skin tone changed. Above that, I looked the same as before, but below, I saw that my waist, legs, and genitals had been replaced with those of a woman. Shocked, I touched my new body, realizing that they had used the woman, the one who had tried to kill me. I couldn't bring myself to feel guilty, not with what I had been through. In awe, I stood up and found my legs even and whole. They had taken her entire lower body and transplanted it onto me. "Your lower body was severely damaged," the robot's voice explained. "It required large-scale replacement." Horrified, I thought I'd lost everything, my masculinity, my manhood. As I touched the new shape between my legs, I shivered. Was I now technically a woman? I wasn't sure. The loss of my manhood was overwhelming, but as I ran my hands over my new legs, feeling no pain, I realized just how lucky I was to be alive. "We are finished with the survey and are returning to home station. We will be unable to continue monitoring you," the robot added, and just like that, I lost consciousness once more. When I woke up again, I was back on the street. I glanced around nervously, noticing that there was no one in sight. If there had been any witnesses to what had happened, they were hiding, unwilling to be seen. Looking down at my nude body, I saw my new legs, and surprisingly, I felt relieved. I knew I should have been horrified by the loss of my masculinity, but instead, I felt grateful to be alive. Becoming more of a freak didn't matter as much anymore. What mattered was that I was still breathing. I looked around again, but there was no sign of Noah or his girlfriend, which didn't surprise me. What did surprise me, and I was thankful for, was the pile of clothes scattered nearby, mine and the girlfriend's. After quickly putting on her pants, shoes, and my shirt, I rifled through her purse and took her wallet. I figured she wouldn't need it anymore. As I opened my own wallet, I found the business card Olivia had given me. I smiled, feeling a spark of hope. After only a brief hesitation, I started walking toward the nearest phone, thinking that maybe, just maybe, I had a new job and a second chance. If you appreciated this story and wish to show your support, don't forget to join me on Patreon for exclusive content.